I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a trip back in time to one of the oldest Soulslikes on the market. From 2016, let's rank the boss fights of Sultan Sanctuary. One of the first games to really emulate the FromSoft style, they nailed the atmosphere and energy that came with the earlier Souls games. You level up at sanctuaries, there's weapon scaling, you drop your salt when you die and have to retrieve it lest you lose it forever. There are creeds which take the role of covenants but have more interesting gameplay effects. There are interconnected areas that take advantage of the 2D Metroidvania map, and of course, we have the boss fights. Every boss has a handful of 3 to 4 moves, with some also having basic combos on top of that which they can use in battle, and the challenge comes from adapting to the movesets so you can come out with a victory. I decided, against my better judgment, to run the game with a simple dagger, as in my 2017 playthrough of the game on my old YouTube channel, which I will link down below even though I really don't want to, I used a strength weapon to decimate my foes. Let it be known that while this game isn't that hard, going in with a dagger that has minuscule range was certainly a choice. Also, being blunt, I will not be ranking the Unspeakable Deep, the tutorial boss of the game, as I just wasn't good enough to beat it, and you only get one shot per playthrough. But it'd probably be near the bottom anyway, as its moveset is rather simplistic. With all that being said, every Sultan Sanctuary boss, ranked. Let me know your favourite boss down below. At number 22, we have the Bloodless Prince, found in the lower portion of the Ziggurat of Dust. Due to the limitations of the 2D combat and needing to adhere to Dark Souls design, there are quite a few bosses in Sultan Sanctuary who end up just being simple rolling tests. The Bloodless Prince, for how late in the game you fight him, ends up feeling the most underwhelming of any boss in the game, as every attack has a simple counter. Roll between his legs, roll again to reach his back, and hack away until his move ends or he turns around. He has a dragging move where he runs his fist across the ground that caught me off guard once or twice, but by this point in the game, I'm leveled to the point where I can handle a bit of punishment in my journey to find the secrets of the island. It doesn't help that the Bloodless Prince is the second boss of the Ziggurat, and he is severely outclassed by the first fight here, which is a dynamic mage battle against a creature wielding fire magic. Then we get here and it's yet another iteration of the slam hand against floor to try crushing the player enemy that we've seen countless times throughout the game. The only real danger comes from the stomps he adds to his combos as you whittle his health down, which, if they hit, can send you flying and force you to heal and reapproach the boss. But ultimately, the Bloodless Prince offers nothing new that we haven't already faced prior, and that makes him the most disappointing boss in the game for me. At number 21, we have That Stench Most Foul, fought in the Mire of Stench. Honestly, if we're going by visual design alone, I actually love this boss. The horrifying maws scattered across its body and its literal naming scheme are so unique in comparison to a lot of the undead hollow bosses we see in Sultan Sanctuary. Where the boss loses me though is the actual fight. It's not bad or hard, it's just boring. That Stench Most Foul's main attack is to summon smaller floating mouths to attack the player. They build up poison when they bite you, and when summoned, the boss creates a poison cloud in the direction of the spawns, so you have to be careful. The issue is that these minions don't have a limit, so if you don't have the DPS to take them down quickly, you can end up with an infinite amount of them in the arena. And their AI isn't the best, so many times they'll just Blair Witch in the corner as more get summoned, but still. Its other attacks are relatively tame, a Bramble Burst AoE that damages the player if they're too close, a Poison Breath attack that depending on your position in the arena can be a real bitch to dodge, and some melee arm swipes which are predictable and punishable when you see the wind-up. I'm just not a fan of fights where the gimmick is that the boss has to summon smaller enemies to help it out. Fight your own battles, that Stench Most Foul. At number 20, we have the Mad Alchemist, fought in the Watching Woods. To be honest, the Mad Alchemist doesn't do anything wrong to earn a spot this low on the list. It's more that he just doesn't have the health to be a major threat to the player by the time they reach him. He's got 4 different vials he can throw with different effects, a green vial which spawns minions you need to kill lest you find them overwhelming you, a blue vial which creates electricity that follows the player, a red vial which creates 3 homing fire orbs that you need to carefully dodge, and a purple vial which can create arcing energy scythes that move in the player's direction. The danger comes from how the fight is so early in the game that you don't have the equipment to handle elemental weaknesses. However, as I alluded to earlier, if you've got the damage and you've been leveling up well from the first few zones in the game, you can out-DPS the Alchemist before he even becomes a threat. I was able to tank a lot of hits and stagger him out of attacks with relative ease using my dagger, and I can only imagine someone with a harder hitting weapon would have an easier time. I like his concept, and his visual design is fantastic, but I don't find him particularly memorable or difficult because I kill him so quickly every time I play the game. At number 19, we have the False Jester, found in the upper half of the Sunken Keep. He mimics the form of the true Jester as a way to ensnare and trap adventurers to their doom, and in concept I really like a fight where you face a mimic variant of a character or creature you encounter in the game. But the False Jester doesn't really lean into the theming aside from the look. It's just a decently tough melee fight with a moveset you can block or dodge through. The True Jester gives players a special brand that allows them to flip gravity at certain points, and I wish the False Jester were a fight where its moveset took advantage of this power in some fashion. He's also entirely optional, as if you defeat the boss in the lower part of the Sunken Keep, you get a key that allows you to skip his boss room entirely. In a way, I like that the Sunken Keep gives players the option to fight one boss or the other to progress, but because the Jester is already a bit forgettable in comparison to the Kraken Cyclops boss in the same zone, he suffers for it. I do think he's a difficulty spike in the sense that he's happy to cancel combo chains at lower health, and he got me extremely low in terms of HP when I defeated him, but I always forget that he's a fight, and I think there are better swordsman-style bosses later in the game. At number 18, we have the Witch of the Lake, fought at Siam Lake. Perhaps the most infamous boss in the game, the Witch is playfully known by players as the Bitch of the Lake, because that's exactly what she's going to make you, and you just have to accept your inevitable demises. She's a pure magic fight, floating above the ground and casting various magic attacks you have to avoid. There's her Arcane Barrage spell, where she points her staff at a downwards angle and launches a full AK-47 amount of orbs to demolish the player, and to put it bluntly, if you're caught in this attack, you will die. The only way to avoid it is to stay beneath the witch, allowing you to punish her while she's in the animation. Her other brutal attack is her Dark Arrows, where she summons an orb that travels in a direction before then shooting arrows that follow the player. Getting caught by one of them will stagger you, meaning the rest will likely hit you as well, killing you instantly. You'd think rolling is a good plan, but just running and using the edge of the arena to dodge is actually your best bet, as the recovery time from your roll will get you hit. Her other 2 attacks are less brutal, a melee limb smack you can punish, and a Dark Swarm where she summons a semicircle of homing orbs that spin around. I found this move easy to jump dash through, and it's just making sure you're ready for a follow-up that's the challenge. No other boss in the game has the one-shot potential of the Witch, no matter your build. Combine that with her often floating out of reach of the player, meaning sometimes you can't damage her, or god forbid she just flies off the screen entirely, and you're looking at a fight which will make you rage in frustration. Thank god there's no boss run back though, as your sanctuary is literally on the edge of the lake. She's the wrong kind of difficulty, and yet she certainly is one of the most memorable encounters in the game. At number 17, we have the Forgotten King, fought in the Crypt of the Dead Gods. This is a gank fight that sees you facing the Forgotten King, the Forgotten Knight, and the Forgotten Judge, a perverse recreation of the Creed of the Three, one of the starting covenants for the game, and the one that I was a part of. And by god, Sultan Sanctuary was not made for fighting 3 enemies at once. Watching my footage is like watching a football match, as I get kicked around and flung this way and that as the replacement for the ball. The Judge is the true danger in this fight, as her magic homing attack often pairs badly with her compatriots to make a very uncomfortable dodge timing. I always try to kill her first because once she goes down you can shield most of the bullshit from the other two. It's just getting lucky enough to reach that point. The Forgotten King is easy aside from his quick kick attack, which has a fast wind-up and knocks the player down. And the Knight, while certainly tough to dodge in conjunction with the King, can be whittled down like any other sword-wielding foe you've faced up to this point. I'm just not a fan of a fight where I spend more time flat on my ass because every attack does knockback damage while I'm praying I can kill the Soul Spellcaster before things get too serious. At least they have the decency to not include any changes at half health, the fight remains the same from start to finish, a small mercy for the player. At number 16, we have the untouched Inquisitor found in the Dome of the Forgotten. I'll be blunt, I mainly rank this boss as high as it is because I enjoy the design and the aesthetic, but honestly, it's more of a mini-boss encounter, a precursor to the true fight you unlock a short while after. The Inquisitor uses a series of pincer attacks using his axed hands, which seem threatening at first due to their high range and decent damage, until you realize you can dodge through all of his telegraphs with relative ease. Some of his attacks also have a slight follow-up, so you can never feel safe after your first dodge. If it's on the ground as opposed to levitating, you can lock him in a stagger chain that allows you an easy victory, as long as you have the stamina to handle it. Honestly, I'd give this boss my vote for easiest fight in the game, though I'm unsure if that's a hot take or not. He ranks higher than the aforementioned fights because he doesn't do anything remotely wrong in my eyes. He does the bare minimum, and had he just a slightly different moveset when you lower his health, I think he could have ranked much higher on the list. At number 15, we have the Kraken Worm found atop the Castle of Storms. I don't know whether this is a hot take or not, but I find the Worm to be an insane difficulty spike in Sultan Sanctuary. Every boss up to this point has had fairly understandable movesets that can be safely blocked through or dodged. The Worm bucks this trend with a host of extremely powerful fire attacks and melee attacks, which can one or two-shot the player if you're not careful. I don't mind strong melee hits as long as you get the time to recover and restore your HP afterwards. What I heavily dislike is the burning effect from the fire attacks. That means once you're hit by a flame breath, you'll take the initial damage, and then extra damage over time that reduces your health to near zero. Even with a shield that's designed to help against fire damage, you're not truly in the clear unless it's a 100% block rate. The move where it flies into the air and spews fire down is also tied to RNG, as sometimes it'll fire its flames halfway across the screen, and other times it'll fire its flames before it even comes onto the screen, making it very difficult to react to in the moment. If there's a tell for this, I do not see it. It may be easier, but I prefer a bit of consistency in my Soulslikes, and this boss feels so inconsistent to me. Difficulty spikes are fine, but the whole Castle of Storms area, and by extension the boss, felt like a genuine punch in the face to me, and people will either love the extra challenge or hate the sudden boost. And for me, it ends up in the latter. At number 14, we have the Kraken Cyclops, found in the depths of the Sunken Keep. Depending on how you progress through the keep, you will either face this Cyclops, the False Jester, or both, as defeating one allows you to skip the other and vice versa. The Cyclops starts out with an unassuming series of easy-to-dodge attacks that don't really leave a big impression. At most, his slide and drag attacks can feel tough to time the dodges for because they're not as obvious as the overhead slash, and he caught me out a few times during my playthrough. The challenge is when it hits less than 50%, as his attacks immediately become faster, giving you less openings to get your attacks in. Suddenly, the moves you found easy to dodge are getting chained into tougher combos that leave you flung across the arena, and the boss is great at making distance due to his leap attack that means you can't get out of his reach. He reminds me of an Elden Ring or a Bloodborne fight, where the best way to heal is to actually dodge into the enemy and hope you have enough time to get it off. Beyond that, I think this boss doesn't crack a higher spot because it feels randomly placed. I think this hits on an aspect of Sultan Sanctuary's world design that doesn't quite work with me, because we're going from a woodland area to a sunken keep, and this boss is just chilling in an open clearing with no real fanfare. I don't know, it never really worked for me, and I know the point of the world in Salt and Sanctuary is that it's meant to be an amalgamation of things that don't make sense together, but even then, cool design, fun fight, good for the early game, that's about it. At number 13, we have the Tree of Men, the boss of the Red Hall of Cages dungeon. This is one of the more unique boss encounters in the game, as we're not going up against a creature per se, we're going up against a concept, a raging creation of various torture tools and devices that's been given animation. The first phase sees us needing to destroy the men hanging off the cages. To do this, you use platforms on either side of the arena to get to their level and then attack away. The challenge comes from the flamethrowers set up on the walls nearby that periodically fire across the platform. Dodging them is paramount to succeeding here, but it's worth being careful because there are bottomless pits on either side of the boss arena too. The enemies we're killing all use variations of moves we've dealt with during the area, and once they're taken down, the second phase involves us attacking the weak spot on the head to deal damage. It seems complicated at first, and I died a few times trying to figure out the best strategy, until I realized just jumping over its slams leaves its head in range on top of the platforms. And from there, it was just doing damage while avoiding the flamethrowers until the boss went down. Tree of Men feels like a puzzle boss in that sense, but I really enjoy it, and I think it's one of the most unique encounters in the game. At number 12, we have the Unskinned and the Architect, found in the depths of the Salt Alchemanciery. This pair is a duo fight where your aim is to take both of them down to progress. The Unskinned is the large lumbering beast whose slams are dangerous if you can't block or dodge them, while the Architect is the floating woman, twin of the Witch of the Lake, who gave birth to the creatures of the Alchemanciery due to her manipulation of salt. She likes to play it safe, using either a semi-homing bolt of magic that you can dodge relatively easily, or she summons a series of AoE magic traps around the arena that you have to dodge and jump over, and these are what will kill you. She's very subtle in the way she fights, which can make for a deadly combo once you've got the Unskinned forcing you to roll out of the way of his attacks directly into one of her landmines. But once she goes down due to her smaller HP pool, the Unskinned is effectively just a regular big enemy that you can kill with ease. On their own, neither of these bosses are a threat. Together, they are slightly less of a threat, and honestly well balanced for their spot in the game, especially as you'll have just come from the Witch of the Lake the area prior, who was one of the least balanced bosses in the game. But the developers never really took advantage of having a gank fight where the boss's movesets could line up and combo off of each other. It feels like two bosses in the same arena, but doing separate things, almost like a randomizer would, which is a bit of a shame. At number 11, we have Kraken Dragon Scores, the penultimate boss fight of the game, and I have no idea if I'm saying that name right, there was nothing on the internet to tell me how to pronounce it. The Lord of Storms, you can assume that this beast is the reason why the player's ship sinks at the start of the game, stranding you on this insane island. His lumbering form is only succeeded by his powerful lightning magic, which can surprisingly hit hard even with lightning-resistant armor. The biggest challenge I had with Scores was that he's incredibly difficult to roll through. If you're not pressed right up against him, there's a chance your roll fails and you get pushed back out right into whatever attack you were trying to avoid. As such, I found myself getting clipped and stuck in his Thunder Breath attack more often than I cared to admit. His Triton Stab too, I feel like I'm usually good at dodging regular stab attacks, but this one kept me on my toes. The Lightning Ball can be tough to avoid, as depending on when you dodge away from it, you might get caught in the aftershock of the attack and still take damage. And the attack that got me the most was his Shock Trap. He fires 3 prongs from his trident that remain on the ground, and does this 3 different times. Each prong hurts, and sometimes he'll actually fire the third volley behind himself, so if you gamble incorrectly, you could find yourself rolling right behind him and into the third attack. Luckily, the boss leaves itself open due to its intense size, so you can capitalize on almost all of its attacks, with the exception of the orb. I don't like how janky his hitbox is to roll through though, as it doesn't feel good to get pushed back by his body, but the rest of the moveset is relatively fair and quite shocking, and worthy of a number 11 spot. Hold it, before we reach the top 10 of Sultan Sanctuary's bosses, I have a quick message for you. We're trying to reach 30,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If you really enjoy this video, or you've watched a few of my videos now, and you're thinking about it, maybe consider parrying that subscribe button right there so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. Or you can go the extra mile and become a channel member. It's $4.99 a month, it gets you early access to future videos, it gets you a shout out in the description and at the end of every video as well, and there may be some special perks coming later in the year for you channel members, so keep an ear out, it's gonna be good. Back to the Salt and the Sanctuary. At number 10, we have the Sodden Knight, the first proper boss of the game. It's very clear to me that the first two bosses you encounter on your journey have far more effort put into them because those are the ones the player is almost guaranteed to see. The Sodden Knight has a handful of sword combos, many of which feel different and can be blocked or dodged through. He has a leap attack that you can dodge beneath if you're careful, and he has a lightning shockwave that travels along the floor which you have to jump over, which may lead you into taking a sword to the face because you ignore what the boss is up to in the meantime. At half health, his eyes glow blue and his combos become a bit faster, more aggressive. Your moments to punish the boss are lessened, and it's about figuring out when the safe moments are to get a hit in, then backing off and surviving the next few combos to stay alive. And the best time to get a hit in is when he sheaths his sword. Given the vastness of the arena, it surprises me how much pressure he puts on the player, and how little room you have to maneuver if you let yourself get cornered. He's just a really solid intro into the game's mechanics, and teaches you enough of the right lessons to survive that you'll hopefully be able to handle the upcoming areas. Plus he's got Viking vibes, and Vikings are cool. At number 9, we have the Third Lamb, the main boss of the Dome of the Forgotten. Once a proud hippogriff alongside her master, she was sacrificed by the untouched Inquisitor into becoming her thrall, and now we have to slay the lamb if we want to receive the Hardlight brand needed to progress the game. While this wasn't a particularly hard boss for me, I managed to beat her on my first try. I really love the design and the lore of the fight. This creature was warped, malformed, and shaped into a chimera and the powers that come with it. From the classic poisonous tail, to the various talon swipes and strikes that follow, you're facing a rabid creature who wants nothing more than to consume you, and yet the danger comes in the form of its lightning attacks. During phase 1, as long as you hug the boss, you'll be able to dodge its initial lightning spew, but once you reach the half health threshold, it changes, with the boss adding an extra blast on the end of the attack that chains into 3 homing projectiles you have to dodge. They do good damage, but feel fair to avoid. I like the Third Lamb, because it has an easy to understand moveset that I felt good figuring out. The tells aren't too difficult, but I can see why some would struggle here, and that's the perfect boss difficulty for me. I wish she didn't stagger as much as she does, but hey, if that's my biggest complaint, that's not the worst thing in the world. At number 8, we have Castjaw the Cruel, the boss of the Pitchwoods, and this game's ode to Gravelord Nito. He's an optional fight found at the very end of an annoying platforming area, yet I really like his design and his energy. He doesn't have a lot of attacks, but those he does have, well, they hit hard. His main attack has him lifting his sword, pausing for a moment, then teleporting to you to stab it down. The challenge here is learning the timing, as once you know it, you can dodge the stab and punish immediately. His second attack is him summoning shadowy swords from beneath the ground, which you can avoid too by simply running in the other direction. If you're away from the boss when this happens, you'll get a few chances to hit him too, which is nice and helpful. Then there's his 3-hit combo. Unless you stagger him mid-combo, he'll always perform all 3 hits, and he can change the side he's facing so only the last hit is punishable. At half health, his attacks remain the same, but his downward stab is now 3 stabs instead of 1, meaning you have to dodge or block multiple hits to survive. If you can manage this, you can equip any type of elemental damage, you're gonna shred his health bar immediately. Not a hard fight, but I love the design, and I love the callback to Nito. Good stuff. At number 7, we have the disemboweled husk found in Hager's Cavern. The corpse of the aforementioned pirate Hager, it's currently being controlled like a marionette by something from within, and he truly fights like the pirate captain he is. His main attack is his flintlock blunderbuss, which blasts ferocious flames directly in front of him. He can sometimes chain together multiple blasts, and my strategy was always to roll inwards and around the boss, or just shield my way and tank the fire damage. He has some sword combos you'd expect from a swashbuckler, though none of them felt threatening due to their ease of blocking. The only attack that had me on edge was his raining fire, where he shoots into the air and flames rain down on the arena. Because of his aggression with the sword swings, it's easy to dodge the flame rain, only to get stun locked into a slice because you weren't paying attention. He also gets a lunge attack after mid-health, which allows him to catch up to the player's position, ensuring you never get a moment to heal. I remember on my original playthrough getting bodied by this boss multiple times to the point where I thought I couldn't beat him. But with enough determination, his moveset isn't that brutal to learn, and a good shield goes a long way. Honestly, on a good day, I'd have him in my top 5, but the other bosses on the list made more of an impression on me this time around. At number 6, we have Mynameispunch Mal, a hidden boss atop Mal's floating castle. She's one of the few arcane fights in the game, but I like that she weaves the magic with the melee attacks relatively well. Her main attack is a missile rain, where white circles appear on the arena, and soon after, a barrage of holy missiles will then attack them. Dodging away is the best bet, and if you can get behind Mal while this attack is active, you can get some good damage. She also has a classic Soulsborne spell, summoning 5 homing orbs around her that she then fires in bursts towards the player. Won't lie, I'd suck at dodging these, and they do a lot of damage, so my goal was more to minimize the damage I knew I'd be taking. Lastly, she has a forward holy slash that I found surprisingly tough to avoid, especially at half health when the slash becomes a 3-hit combo with surprising reach and speed. Chained with faster spells, and Mynameispunch Mal becomes a real threat at the halfway point. I can't say whether her fight is worth it though, because she doesn't give you any salt upon beating her on New Game. So if you want the experience, go for it. If you're after salt to level up though, she's not your best quarry. At number 5, we have the Coveted, found in the depths of the ancient temple. And yes, you're seeing things correctly. The boss is the giant axe. In a rather unique twist for a gank fight, the boss's health bar is directly tied to the weapon itself, and not the ghostly beings that hover nearby. So the only way to do damage is to attack the axe either when it's in the hands of the ghosts or when it's thrust upon the ground. For me, this was an insanely rough fight because the axe is strong against slash, the damage type of my dagger, meaning I instead had to use my pistol to whittle the health down until I was out of bullets and then go from there. One ghost will always pick up and wield the axe, with the other remaining unarmed. The axe wielder can swing it at the player, twirl it around to catch you off guard, and most often throw the axe in an attempt to hit the player with the weapon or its shockwaves from the impact. This is the best moment to damage the axe, as it's on the ground and vulnerable, but you have to watch out as both ghosts have access to a soul arrow style arcane projectile you have to dodge. As such, you have to keep track of the unarmed ghost while trying to damage the axe to succeed in the fight, and honestly, the pistol was kind of the way to go. It's such a unique concept, and I love when the boss itself is tied to something you wouldn't expect, like the weapon. I always remember this fight fondly, and I think it highlights the uniqueness that Salt and Sanctuary brings with some of its better battles. At number 4, we have Ronin Kran, found in Kran's Pass. This optional encounter was the hardest in the game for me, because Ronin Kran hits like an absolute monster. Every attack did significant damage, even with rings that reduced the pain I was taking, and his combos are fast, with him being able to adapt and switch up on the fly if needs be. Now, he's based on Artorias from the Souls series, so of course, he has the interruptible buff attack that you can stagger him out of if you're careful, but if the buff completes, he does a ton more damage with his attacks for the next 10 seconds. I found it best to bait out his kick attack and roll past him as he charges, as it would run out the buff when active, and give me distance in case I wanted to try shooting him with the pistol. Ultimately, blocking his tougher combos and looking for small openings was what got me through this fight, but I won't lie, he had me on the ropes, because one single mistake would mean redoing the fight from scratch, including a rather annoying boss run back that has you unlighting and relighting your torch to do minimal parkour. And with half health making him more aggressive, it's a miracle I made it out of this fight in one piece. Ultimately, I respect the difficulty and the adaptable combos he can pull off, even if I think I would skip him on future runs due to his high challenge and optional nature. At number 3, we have the Queen of Smiles, found within the Village of Smiles. The second boss of the game, I can't explain it, but I think she's a perfect fight for the point where we encounter her, and her moveset is both simple to learn and tricky to master. Her main attack is her sword combo. For the first half of the fight, it's a 2-hit sword attack that you can block or dodge through to avoid, though she can switch sides to attack you if you roll through her, so I'd recommend blocking it the whole way. In Phase 2, and sometimes during Phase 1, she can add a third strike to the combo, making it even more dangerous. She has a dash move she likes to use where she'll thrust at you at the end of her movement, but you can easily roll through the dash to avoid the attack and punish. Lastly, she's got a sword spray where 8 swords fire out around her in broken intervals, and you have to position yourself to avoid them, which is fine in Phase 1, easily punishable. Phase 2, however, adds on a windmill attack following it, which you have to be ready to dodge and punish. With her faster speed in Phase 2 and her extra combo potential, she really tests the player while having a moveset that is very easy to understand. It doesn't feel as brutal as the Sodden Knight's hard hits, nor is it too easy like the Mad Alchemist you encounter in the next area. She's a perfect difficulty, and that's very rare in this game where it feels like progression doesn't always equal fair difficulty. Plus, her design is amazing. Maybe don't move to her village though, lest you end up adorned upon her walls as a grotesque smiling corpse. At number 2, we have the Dried King, found atop the Ziggurat of Dust. A fiery mage, I really enjoy this fight because of how all the attacks feel balanced on their own, but then paired with each other flow incredibly well. His first attack is a Searing Beam, where he'll summon lines of fire that appear across the screen. You just have to stand in a spot where the lines aren't touching you, and you'll avoid the damage. Then there's Fiery Blades, his main melee attack that summons a vast projectile of fast-hitting blade slashes in a downwards cone. Easy to dodge through, but can catch the player out if they're focused on a different move and they don't see it. The Fire Burst attack has a similar dodge timing as you can just roll through the boss. He'll shoot 3 fireballs at different angles in one direction, and it's up to you to get through them safely. Combine either of those last 2 moves though with his Searing Beams, and you get Chaos, which is what happens in Phase 2 when everything speeds up. Lastly, he has an ability where upon raising his hands, he can create fire underneath him that hurts anyone staying too close, a hard counter to anyone sticking to him to attack, though he didn't count on my dagger being able to stagger him out of the animation multiple times. I think I had the perfect build for this boss, but I just love the way dodging his attacks felt, and the goofy skeleton head makes me smile every time I see him. And at number 1, we have the Nameless God, the final boss of the game. I think it's impressive to see this boss at the top spot when it has forced fall damage whenever you enter the arena. You see, the point of this game is that the god of the island wants you to kneel before it. You are but an insignificant piece of salt, flotsam and jetsam, and upon entering its boss room, it forces you to kneel from the fall damage before the fight. Then you battle, and his moveset is brutally fair. It has a 4// greatsword combo, which can be hard to avoid up close. Your only option is to shield through it, or you'll find yourself flat on your back, and not in the fun way. The god can easily adapt to this by cancelling the combo depending on your distance, often then moving to his magic attack where he summons various arcane energies to chase the player. I often had to bounce off of the wall to avoid taking damage because getting caught in this attack is immediate death, especially if he corners you. He's got a charge attack I like to bait to keep him at a distance, and most importantly, he has a greatsword throw. This greatsword will appear above the player and slam down, causing shockwaves you need to avoid. Then the sword will reappear in the boss's hands so he can slam it down in front of him. Basically, the moment this move is used, the goal becomes to get behind the boss because you can punish him significantly for his greed. Unless it's used in a corner, in which case, fuck my drag, right? The boss has a lot of aggression, befitting of his final encounter status, and yet doesn't feel insurmountable. In fact, the only part of the fight I heavily dislike is the run back, as the shrine you respawn at is at the very start of the Still Palace, forcing you to do multiple parkour loops that aren't interesting after the 50th time. I enjoy a run back if there's something to challenge me on the way, but this is a whole lot of nothing. Doesn't change that the nameless god ends up being the best and most entertaining boss though, in Salt and Sanctuary. And that's my list. Have you ever played Salt and Sanctuary before? Hopefully this video has interested you in it. There will be a Steam link in the description below, though this footage was captured on the Nintendo Switch. Which boss was your favourite? Let me know, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. My social medias are on screen now, feel free to follow me if you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter or my Discord, but my Twitter is the best place to go. A massive shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing, and I'll see you guys next time for another video. Adios!